excited to introduce to you today our presenter, Aaron Shine, the founder of Attainable Home. And Aaron has always had a passion for finance, real estate, and sustainability, and much of his effort and career has surrounded furthering that goal. So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron to kick things off.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming tonight. As Courtney said, my name's Aaron Shine, and tonight we're going to be talking about energy savings, and I was trying to think of titles here. Demystifying energy savings and electrify with confidence. So we'll see a lot of these words used lately, like electrify, sustainable, green living, net zero, everything like that. So we can help or talk through demystifying a lot of these terms. And to talk about a little bit of the outline tonight, I'm just going to explain a little bit about my background and schooling and why I got into this, and then why electrify, and talk about climate change a little bit, sustainability, green challenges, some challenges that are facing the industry, and in particular, I really love helping homeowners work through all the confusion and kind of convolutedness that surrounds a lot of this industry as well, so that you can move forward with confidence. And then we'll talk about specific energy savings projects that are common around town or just with homeowners in general or homes. And then the usual, I would say correct, but usual sensible order to go in so that it has the most impact for you. Both on your wallet and for the environment. And then we'll talk about tax credits and local rebates that are around town and Edgewater specifically, and then how you can finance. And then if you like towards the end, I don't plan to make this too long, but we could do a Q&A, and even if you have some specific questions about your own homes, we can dive into those too, if you like. So we'll get started. So. As the intro said, my formal schooling is in finance and real estate. I grew up in Puerto Rico and Florida, which I'll talk about in a second with the recent storms and things about climate change, but was into sustainability pretty early on. So right after graduating college, I moved out here and started with a solar company, solar design installation, and then got into energy efficient lighting, and just kind of found myself in the entrepreneur world. So these are the four companies I've been involved with here. Shine Retrofits, 3BL Lighting, we're all about commercial energy efficient lighting. So we used to do big warehouses where, if you retrofit one warehouse full of lighting or one big facility like this, it's worth like a neighborhood worth of solar in terms of environmental impact. Not to mention even back then, with the advent of like T5 fluorescent and LED lighting and everything, the payback on it was a no-brainer. 6 months to 3 years, you can finance it 100% and make a really great ROI, return on investment, with a low payback. So I really gravitated towards that. But built up and sold that commercial lighting company, took a break, traveled a bit, business conferences, all kinds of stuff. Then I couldn't stay away for too long, and then started Attainable Home. And my idea with Attainable Home, these are Florida homes. I spent COVID back in Florida where I grew up, but I also wanted to prove out that you could do an affordable net zero home, and net zero is defined as mostly as you produce as much energy as you use through renewable sources. It's kind of like you can have an electric car, but if you power it through coal-fired power plants, how green is that really? So I wanted to prove, in addition to kind of real estate investing fundamentals, where I did a whole home renovation with 2 homes, did all these energy efficiency projects that we're going to talk about in an order, what I thought was a sensible order. A lot of it was an experiment, but then added solar at the end to power the house and the electric car 100%. And real numbers on these homes. Oh, also speaking to the goals a bit, my rule starting out was it couldn't be more, the home at the end of the project could not be worth more than the average median home price of the zip code, so that, like I'm an elder millennial, but home buyers, and especially younger home buyers, could actually afford to do this and have it be feasible and be green. And also, if you had to move out, you could rent that out for 10 to 15% return on investment for wealth building effects. I essentially wanted to cover all the bases. So that one, I mean, these are not Denver numbers, but that was 200 grand and this was 300 grand when I bought it, and that's why I went back to Florida to prove it out. But did a kind of a fix and flip type of renovation, but the efficiency and solar on both homes were $20,000 and $25,000 total. And that eliminated or created $2,000 a year worth of energy productions from renewables. So right there, that's a 10% return on your money. Stock markets anywhere from 8 to 12%, bonds are 4 to 6% as kind of a baseline benchmark. Going back to the word electrify, why electrify? Why be green? Why go renewable, sustainable? Does anyone want to jump in? This huge push towards electrification, moving away from gas. Climate change, yep. Xcel Energy is, correct, Xerxes. By the way, Xerxes is my business partner, full disclosure, in just heat pumps, in our heat pump business. But climate change, and Xcel Energy next year is investing, is it $440 million? $410 million in the Denver metro area for electrification. So not only is it coming from federal in terms of mandates for environmental improvement, for obvious reasons, kind of a leading question here, but for environmental improvement, but it pencils out for many different organizations, including all the way down to the homeowner, which hopefully we'll get into. Why electrify, right? Climate change was the answer back there. I just pulled these headlines from a couple years ago. When I first moved back to Colorado last year, I volunteered with Go Electric Colorado, which helps people electrify, and probably over 50% of our calls, the advisor calls, was how to rebuild after the Marshall Fire with all these building codes that have been upgraded for anything, updated for not only building code safety, but energy efficiency, and homeowners are like 2-3 years in and they're just pulling their hair out, trying to figure out how to rebuild and the trauma and everything else going on with that. Side note too, probably 90% of the phone calls were about heat pumps and figuring out the confusion with heat pumps specifically. But climate change wise, it was started by humans, but at the time, high heat, drought, high winds fueled it. And so going back to Florida for a second, that first house I showed you, my first project, this was Hurricane Ian. I grew up in hurricanes my whole life, Puerto Rico and Florida. They've never been this bad, ever. 10-foot storm surge, Cat 5. That storm was 130 miles wide. And so it sits over your house for like 6 to 8 hours. And whether you live there now, I know we're in Denver, our families live here, right? My whole family lives, retired family and parents in Florida. So it affects us either way. I had to rebuild the house after doing the whole renovation. I made this slide on the way over here, or just before. This is yesterday, Hurricane Milton. So that video, my brother took it with his drone across from his neighborhood. 17 tornadoes touched down yesterday. Tornadoes, those were the neighborhoods on the east side of Florida before the hurricane even hit. This is Grove City. These are what the coastlines do now. 8 to 12 foot storm surge, and that's the second house. So I'm gonna go to Florida in a week or two, and now it's back to repairing the yard. And I'm selling the house. Like, I live here now. it's just not worth it, right? So not looking for anything other than it just starts affecting us, whatever you might believe. This is what's going on all around us in a lot of different climates. Now the stats, to get a little bit more positive. 21% of the US's power already comes from renewables. So aside from politics and everything and all the opinions, it makes a lot of sense. And a lot of these technologies are cheaper now to run than fossil fuels. So I looked up some stats here. 40 countries, this was even 2 years ago, 40 countries, I believe, get at least half their electricity from renewable sources. I just pulled some screenshots from online. These are 7 countries who are near 100% renewable. And then the massive growth of renewable power over here. And again, that's, well, a couple projections there. But this is going on behind the scenes, and it makes a ton of sense even for people, even for companies like Excel, moving towards full electrification. Now, what does that do for us? When I work with homeowners or have the Go Electric Colorado calls, I kind of hear a lot of the same questions. It's like, I want to lower my bills, I want to save money, I want to be green, but I don't know where to start. And all this stuff is just massively confusing. Some other questions that come up, what do I do what do I do first? I can't keep up with all these new technologies I'm hearing about. How do the rebates work? How do I know what I'm even putting in for potentially tens of thousands of dollars is even going to benefit me or make sense? The age-old issue of hiring good contractors, right? Who's going to do the work, the actual work, and how do you know it's done correctly? And then can you go off, this is big with heat pumps in particular, the mechanicals, can I go off gas like natural gas or boilers and things and still be comfortable when it's -10 outside? That's a big one. And then home value, there's a lot of other questions, but these are just some that I thought. So once you want to embark on your own project, you need to turn into a mad scientist here. So you start down these, YouTube rabbit holes, and you start learning, and it's hours and hours, and you can often be even more confused than when you started. So I made this graph here. Feel free, I won't be offended if you don't, but I would encourage you maybe take a photo. And I have this updated through the slides. I'll keep coming back to it. But I wanted to put everything in one slide to show you what realistic projects can make an impact, what the rebates exist for, and kind of what they cost on a scale. I'm going to try my laser here. Some of these are kind of, and also starting impact. So I started up here in terms of highest impact and where we start typically with the energy audit. And then it kind of goes down to bigger projects and things you want to probably do later down the line in terms of upgrades. And then when we get into heat pumps or mechanicals, heat pumps will be what's going in, but you have water heaters and heating and cooling systems that will fail anyway. So a lot of people will come run into, it's 10 degrees outside, my furnace just failed, and then you're getting all the quotes, and you are kind of getting hard sold into a $12,000 new furnace. It's the old tech, it's nothing efficient, and now you're kind of stuck with that for the next 15, 20 years when with a little bit of planning, you can go after thousands in rebates and be green and energy efficient and so forth. So replacement kind of comes in down here a bit, and then I'll go into why I have solar energy at the bottom. So I wanted to start, tried an attention grabber. I may offend some people, so then I wrote every house, okay? It's not just your house. The leaky bucket, right? We're gonna start with air sealing. Air sealing and really air leakage is the proper term for this. So every home is not airtight. Like if you turn this upside down, no water's coming out, right? A completely airtight house would have no air moving in and out. And so with energy audits and air sealing, that's typically what we want to do first, or focus on first, because one, it's the best bang for the buck. It's cheap to do for your own home. You can do it with caulk, spray foam, but kind of made this graph to show what happens in the winter. So just basic science-wise, hot moves to cold. So what happens is you're paying for heat to heat your home, and it's escaping through every little hole and nook and cranny all day, every day. And so this leads to like hot and cold rooms. It can lead to massively high energy bills if you have a really leaky home, discomfort, and all the rest. And then it switches mostly in the summer, where you're now cooling the home and you're fighting the heat coming in. And so between air sealing and insulation is, you're not stopping heat transfer, but you're slowing it down to the point where really your mechanicals can operate efficiently. And this is where you get I didn't want to make this too long or too kind of crazy tonight, but this is where you can start reading about passive homes, and code is becoming much more strict around the country, but in Denver, especially, where you're not going to pass inspection on a new home or a major renovation until you seal up all these holes in your house. So myself as an energy auditor, right, we have, sometimes builders don't like us too much because we'll fail the house. They just spent 800 grand building a scrape or something in Denver, and they can fail for a few $100 energy audit, but that's code. And so everyone's pushing towards efficiency. And these are, I just wanted to go through some kind of low-hanging fruit or common areas in your home that may be leaking in and out kind of all day, every day. And I actually got a show and tell. I can pass it around here. These pictures here are from the infrared camera, used from this camera here. I'll just turn it on, and you can kind of play with it as I'm talking, just kind of move it around, but it registers the heat differentials and then the averages. So I'll show the blower door in a second, the tool we use to measure air infiltration, or air leakage, I should say. And then you go around the house and we can find, with that camera, some leak points in your home. So over here, like bathroom fans, the heat lamps, these are often, I have a picture later on, where these are supposed to be vented out of the roof, out of your home, where they're just not connected at all. So they're just into your attic, and huge leak points. You have these whole house fans that, I mean, you could just tell when we start talking about this topic, there's no way that you can seal up all these points here. Huge penetrations. These are like the furnace flue vents, right? But this is the same exact picture. So that camera, when I take a picture, it takes both. And so when I go back with the audits, I can see exactly what's going on with it. You can see here, it was a little cooler that day, right? So you have the venting here, and then you have a really cold spot. And you can see even temperature differentials with that. Some other really common areas. You can see the heat on here just because it's electricity, so it's hotter. But these any can ceiling lights, unless they're sealed with foam in the attic, there's leak points up here. And you can also kind of tell this could be heat from the electrical, but if there's low insulation and things, that heat transfer is getting into your home at all. So there's air leakage, but there's also heat transfer. So air leakage is like sealing up with the bottle example, but an insulation example would be like a blanket. You're stopping heat to be comfortable. And I'll get into insulation in a second, most homes do not have nearly enough insulation. And you end up freezing, or hot and cold floors through the house are a real indicator. This is just an attic hatch where you can see this popcorn ceiling. There's no way to seal this with the popcorn here, so you can see all the dark around the edges, right? There's air leaking in and out all day long. So to bring it back to why do this, comfort, yes, but you're paying for this, you're paying for heating and cooling the house all day. So if you can just seal up this, like on those first 2 projects I did, I just bought 80s homes, the second one was 50s. You go around with caulk and spray foam, you can seal it up by like half. You know, so for $50 on your own, you can spend a few hours and do this. And this is where you start anyway. Sorry, I'm clicking around. First time using this clicker, by the way. This is a new one. Other common areas, fireplaces. Like when we had the blower door running, there was a ton of air coming in through here. The homeowner had been there like 12 years or something like that and had no idea what was even behind there. This is the same picture, another attic hatch example. So in this example, you can have, say, a seal around the outside. It's not too bad, except there's no insulation at all behind a thin wood, like, you know, just a thin piece of wood that doesn't resist heat, I mean, barely at all. So in the summer, your heat's coming into your house all day long, and then in the winter, the cold is. So the way we fix that, you can buy the foam board at Home Depot and just stack it on each other, and you're creating a blanket for the attic hatch specifically. Oftentimes, and these are all real audits within the last couple months that I've been to or have done around town. Oftentimes, people just have holes in the wall, right? We'll go in and there's a hole that big into the wall, and of course, it's going to have you're going to have high energy bills. This is a blower door test. I can just play what it sounds like here. So we go in and do this thing. It's just a quick video. And then we measure the cubic feet per minute and do some calculations, and we can tell roughly how, well, not roughly, it's actually very accurate how leaky your home is. And we go around with that infrared camera while that test is running, and then we can see that's a lot of the photos you're seeing as well. So these are also very common in most homes. This is your concrete basement. Also notice no insulation on the basement walls. So thermal transfer, all these walls are mostly below grade, below ground, so they're touching the earth at all times, which is like 50, I think it's 50 degrees or so on average. Is that right? And then, so that heat's coming, or that cold, I should say, is coming into your house all year. It's good in the summer, flipping in the winter, it's not great. But this is where your floor attaches to the concrete foundation, or the brick. Oftentimes, these cavities are not insulated or air sealed, because back in decades ago, they just built the frame on top and moved on with no energy efficiency in mind at all. So these are really, I mean, there are companies obviously that do this, but you can get some foam board and some caulk, and it's a DIY project, and that makes a big difference too. So that's most homes that we see. And then we're back to the graphs. So that's why I wanted to start with the energy audit, and then we moved on to air sealing. If you hire it out, it's probably a $2,000 to $4,000 project, or even lower if you DIY it, next to nothing. But that sets up your house for the next projects. It's also the cheapest thing you can do, and the biggest energy savings. I mean, every home is different, but that's mostly what it is. The DOE, Department of Energy, Energy Star, they do these studies. They say on average, if you upgrade air sealing and insulation, you can save 10 to 20%. If your home's particularly bad, maybe it's 30 or so. But typically, your mechanicals are half or more of your bill, just to keep up with the temperature outside changing all the time, and heating your water. Insulation, okay, these are a little scary, but these are what attics look like around town. A lot of these homes are 100 years old, and you can just see, I mean, all kinds of stuff going on in there. But to give you kind of a realistic example, you can see even the joists or the trusses underneath here. The insulation is only this high. And new code is like R50. This is like R10, you know, kind of. And it's uneven. You can see that this is a bathroom where they just kind of threw up bats of insulation against the skylight drywall, and it had all kinds of holes in it and everything. And if your attic isn't sealed, like if your attic ceiling isn't sealed, all of this is getting into your house. And it's kind of gross, but it's like rodents and feces and just stuff over time up there. So proper insulation upgrades, we vacuum this out, and we put new insulation in there just for kind of indoor air quality and home health. Also, when you vacuum it out, now your floor is completely bare, and you can seal up everywhere. You go up in there and you seal up the ceiling from in the attic, and then you put in the new insulation, because once you put in insulation that thick, you're not doing too much more in there. But that's kind of the way to go there. This is the example of bathroom vents often are just kind of disconnected. And this is all just leaking right into your bathroom. These are common too sometimes under a garage, like there's a master bedroom above here where it's just open, right? Like somebody threw some bats in there, but you can see this cavity. That's no insulation. So often bedrooms and rooms above these garages, or they call them cantilever areas, are really cold in the winter or really hot because your HVAC just can't keep up with the heat loss or gain. Crawl spaces, it's not on the graph, but I kind of put it in here with the insulation category. These are very common too, where you kind of just have a piece of plywood in your house covering a hole to the crawl space. None of this is insulated. This is ground. This is the earth, and then this is the 80 to 100-year-old brick with zero insulation on it. And again, these are homes that we see. Also, if you notice, the underside of the floor is your kitchen or your living room. And again, wood is only that thick, or I should say thin, and there's nothing slowing down the heat transfer. So if you have cold feet in the winter or cold rooms, maybe you have a crawl space under there that's just completely open to the exterior, basically. So we can address that. And now we're back to insulation upgrades. Insulation can get expensive depending on the project, but bang for the buck, air sealing and insulation, and often companies around town. I don't do these. I do the energy audit side, but I don't do those projects. They do both. They air seal and insulation as one project, one quote. So you can bang out two, and they work kind of perfectly together. On to mechanicals, water heaters. This is an electric water heater, and this is more typical to Colorado. This is Colorado too, and Golden, but this is our typical natural gas water heater. And some of these will last, electric maybe not as much, but 15, 20 years for the natural gas ones. Because of our energy rates in Colorado, so electric might cost like double what it would cost to run a gas water heater in our city here. Just a note too, be careful on the energy guide label. If you're looking at these, kind of look down here at the fine print and see what the estimated kilowatt hour rate, like what electric rate they're actually assuming that number is. For instance, this water heater here in Golden, we were doing an audit, it's like 12 years old and it assumes a 10-cent kilowatt hour rate and we're actually 16, right? So 492 is not true. I mean, inflation and everything, electric rates just, all energy rates rise through the year, a few percentage, but that's more like 700-800 a year, not 492 from 10 years ago. Same thing with gas. You have to look at the therm rate, the rate of therms, and then you can calculate your real energy usage, and that's important because if you're interested in ROI and payback and everything, those are real numbers that we need to figure out what you're really going to save when you do the new ones. So the new Rave are heat pump water heaters, and they look pretty much exactly like the old tank units, except this is a nice video from Ream, but this sits on top. This is the heat pump unit, and it basically just takes the ambient air around the tank, so you need some breathability with these, runs it through the system, takes heat out of the air, and puts it in the water heater. And it's more complicated, however, it saves a ton of energy. So rough numbers in Colorado, yearly energy costs from gas, you'll save probably half. So if you're spending $400 with gas, this might cost $200. Huge savings if you have an electric water heater in town. You go from $800 a year to $200 a year or so. And so heat pump water heaters, if your goal is real energy savings or even going net zero, this is a key part of it. Natural gas tankless units are very efficient too, but then you're not electrifying, you're still on gas. This is just a graph that I had made showing kind of the different sizes of gallons, and this is again not as prevalent in our city here, but you can see the kilowatt hour usage of the new one, heat pump water heater versus conventional. On average, they save about 75% energy versus the old electric ones. This is what they look like installed. They have vents because they have to pull air out of the surrounding area. So you can also vent them. You can vent either side, the intake side and or the outlet side, depending on your home and how you want to set it up. But those two projects I showed you, I had both of these in there, and it was amazing, especially in Florida. They come with like 10-year warranties. I put them in the garage, right? You're pulling 90-degree humid heat all year and just putting it in your water tank. So ultra efficient. Couple of points. They do make some noise. The manufacturers, they're getting much quieter by the year, but they do make a little noise. So you want to go on YouTube, like listen to what they sound like at least, because if they're near a bedroom, most of the time they'll be in your basement here. If they're near your bedroom, they could be a little annoying. Or if it's out in the whole hallway or out in a big room, you just want to make sure. Some other people who have gone net zero in town or kind of green builders in town, they actually put like car insulation in the room, like sound deadening insulation in the small room to help with that. And a quick rule of thumb with these, typical 50-gallon tank will need about 800 cubic feet of air volume just to like operate efficiency. If it's in a tiny closet with the door closed, it's just pulling air, it's just pulling heat from the same air. And some people do that and they walk in there, it's 40 degrees in that room and then your bills go up because it's just operating less efficient. So they need ventilation, either more or less it's like a 10 by 10 room or louvered doors. Louvered doors, if it's not too loud for you, will solve those issues. They do cost more. I mean, you can look them up at Home Depot and Lowe's and things. They can run about double what the just basic electric water heaters cost or something. We'll get into rebates, but just real quick, Excel gives an $800 rebate for these, and then you get a $2,000 federal tax credit. So right there, it's $2,800 just for the two incentives. which pretty much cut the full install price in half. So installed, if you're getting a permit and doing all that, it's kind of a wash. You just have a better unit going forward. Heat pump HVAC systems. These are, again, why I gave the disclaimer. Xerxes and I put this in one of our customers in Park Hill recently. This is a new Bosch heat pump. So what is a heat pump anyway versus like an AC and a furnace? A heat pump is literally an air conditioner that can reverse. It has a reversing valve in it. It pumps the refrigerant both ways, so you can heat the inside or cool the inside as you like. So these are all the rave now. They're replacing gas appliances. And Xerxes did a talk, I think back in April, was it? April, on heat pumps. And yeah, so tons of incentives for these. We could talk about it a little bit. The $2,000 federal tax credit for heat pumps goes with the hot water heater and the heat pump HVAC system. So it's sometimes a good idea to do one in 1 year, and then the federal tax credit resets, and you can get $2,000 again. And that's the case. It resets every year through 2032 for a lot of these. So you can kind of map out your replacement or upgrade plan. And then, I'll just go back to this real quick. So the air handler looks similar to your one now if you have air conditioner or ducted system. But important in our climate is when you put these in, raise them off the ground because they have literal defrosters in here. It's pulling, these will freeze up in the winter. So you have to elevate them off the ground and they'll melt the snow off this unit and then they'll keep pulling air. And there's a lot to talk about with heat pumps, but heat pumps are also mini splits. It's the same thing. Mini splits are called with the wall units ductless units, and the previous one was a ducted system. And so again, I'm just trying to touch on and we can go through some questions and things if you like, but I'm just trying to touch on the major categories, if you will. The big thing with heat pump design, it's not like your typical AC unit where you just kind of do a square footage of your house or people just look at it and they're like, oh, you need a 3-ton or 4-ton. Heat pump design can get very involved if you do it right. So this is called a manual J calculation. This is like a 30-page thing. I just took the first page, but we basically model your house completely. Location, altitude, which way it faces, orientation to the sun, number of rooms, how many people live there. It's a pretty involved process. And then it'll give us your heating and cooling BTUs specifically. And going back to the blower door test, it's important to know your air leakage rate because you size heat pumps based on your air leakage rate if you know it. And so a lot of heat pumps are they've been in Europe for years and years, but they're just making their way to the US now. A huge adoption, but a lot of people are just throwing these in without calculations and you get some pretty big problems like short cycling, discomfort issues in other climates like Florida, humidity issues. So it's a much more, it's a superior technology, able to go off gas, but you have to do it right. This one, I just kind of put this in here. We can model the home with LiDAR. So we actually go around your home with an iPad Pro and use LiDAR, and it models your house in about 10 minutes and tells us exactly the heating and BTU load once we input all the things. So this is pretty cool. We're working with the founders of a company called Amply to help solve the design issue up front with heat pumps and just streamline everything. So quick tips with heat pumps. Forget the old rules of thumb. And we mention that because a lot of legacy HVAC companies are not so quick to adopt this and they'll just kind of see a 3-ton AC in there and throw a 3-ton heat pump. But that is it's not the same. It's apples and oranges. For most of the rebates, including federal, state, local, all the way down, utility, it needs to be a cold climate rated unit, which means that more or less, there are all these calculations they do for the rebates, but more or less they can go down to -13 and -20 degrees and still operate near full capacity. And some brands do that and some don't. But if you do that, I mean, HVAC can be it's an expensive project, but typically on a normal house, there's $5,000 to $8,000 in rebates available for, there's sometimes like 4 to 6 of them, sometimes more, with cities and counties and Excel, and you really have to have your ducks in a row in terms of model numbers and passing tests for cold climate ratings. And then if it's not installed correctly, that's where 90% of the failures come from for those kind of nightmare scenarios. I wanted to throw another project in here, electrical panel upgrades. So when you electrify the home, oftentimes what you can run into are older homes have lower amperage. They can be like 100 amps or 150, but often when you electrify a home, you need a lot more power. So you're giving up gas, but now you're using more electricity, and all these components need like their own breakers in the breaker panel. This is one I tried to grab one where it's basically nearly full, and if you go heat pumps like with the water heater or HVAC system, you might be adding like nearly a whole row of new breakers to meet code and things like that. So here's one where there's room, but again, it needs to be checked with the overall amperage of the home, especially with the older homes, to see if you have enough power to run these to begin with. So oftentimes, I'll go back to this, oftentimes you need a total electrical panel upgrade to incorporate these electric projects, and there's also incentives for those, both locally. I don't think Excel doesn't have these, but Denver local does, and federal tax credits. There are also some there too. So on average, you know, you have to bring the house up to code. It's a new panel. This can be thousands of dollars too, which it's good to be aware of. And then, yeah, I think lastly, wanted to talk about solar energy. I started in solar in 08 here. The industry is largely the same. It's also, in my opinion, got the kind of worst reputation amongst all of this with the marketing and sales that can go into it. You can also get really caught out with the nightmare solar lease stories or renting panels and putting them on your roof, and I could talk for days on that. But in my opinion, solar is one of the last things you want to do, and as I talk about it, why last? These are just the solar I put on that first house in Florida. Why last? So if you plan on going green and doing all this electric work, how do you know how much solar you need until the very end? So we like to look at what your current usage is, what your planned usage is, and then other things like how long are you going to stay in the home? Like let's look at local home value increase of what this might do, because some places care about this and some don't. National studies show that on average solar increases your home value by 2% to 4% if you own it. If you lease it, it's actually, and quick story on this, when I went to refinance this house, the appraiser walked in Florida, and the first question he asked was, do you lease or own the solar panels? That's what he wanted to know about the whole house. Because if you lease it, it's now, you basically have a liability on your roof, you do not have an asset. Because somebody else owns the panels, and most likely it's like a 20 to 30 year lease contract, and they put in these buyout clauses that you may or may not be aware of. So let's say you sell your home, the contract says, oh, okay, well, now you pay $30,000, and you cannot sell the home until you pay us that amount. So it can get pretty sticky, but at least finance it, if not paying it outright. However, so we model what your current usage is, what your projected future use is, and then do you want to do an EV? How many miles a year do you drive? And we can actually model completely what your yearly energy use will be. So if someone's trying to sell you a giant solar system, it's like, I might not need that. And the more sensible efficiency work you can do, you can really get that number down. Like if I had not done efficiency on this house, I wouldn't have been able to fit panels on this roof to equal my energy. That was $16,000 worth of solar panels, and some people will spend like 30 to 40 because they didn't do energy efficiency beforehand. So this is where a ton of the savings come in, and why I'm a proponent for doing solar last if possible. A lot of the new systems in the tech in the panels, they have inverters within the panels themselves, so you can always upgrade it later on too, if you need. It'll cost a bit more, but it is more flexible than it used to be. Quick tips on solar: clear south-facing roof. East and west works too, but that's 10 to 20% less production efficiency. So ideally, you want a south-facing roof and tilted to catch the lower winter sun as well. And there's a calculation to do that. Really don't want much shading at all. So if you have big trees, especially when I used to do solar, like your neighbor on the south side might have massive trees, there's nothing you can do. They're just going to grow bigger unless you ask them to cut them down, which is usually not going to happen. So, and then we talked about leasing panels, and happy to talk about this anymore. So anyway, that's just getting back to the main graph and kind of running through the projects. Federal tax savings. So we talked about $2,000 per year for heat pumps through 2032. There is a 30% uncapped tax credit for solar panels. So that's pretty good, and that's for, I think, geothermal as well. And then for kind of the highest impact projects, you get up to $1,250 for air sealing insulation. Each one of them is like a few $100s, but if you do them all, it caps out at $1,250. Excel Energy, they have a ton of programs with all kinds of rebates, but I just pulled some screenshots from their website. Most of the I think every project we talked about except solar, Excel has rebates for. I also wanted to talk about really quick, they have a 25% bonus rebate program where basically if you do 3 projects within a 2-year time period, they give you a 25% rebate bonus on all 3 projects. So that would realistically equate to, I don't know, $300 to $600 or something, depending on what you do. Because a lot of the rebates are based on the size, like the heat pump units, you have to meet the efficiency standards, but it's also based on literally heating tons at 5 degrees, whatever unit you put in there. So we do those calculations, but it's highly variable. And then they have their own rebates and pretty confusing calculations for insulation upgrades, air sealing, and so forth to go through. But it is well worth it if you kind of go through it. Some tips for Excel. Not only is it a good idea, but they require an energy audit to get the bonus rebates. So you have to start with the energy audit. And the date that you get that is the date that kickstarts the 2-year time period that you have to do 3 projects if you really want to do 3 projects. And then you sign up. Once you do the energy audit, by the way, is like $300 to $500 depending on the scope and who you do it with to start out. Then you can sign up for the whole home efficiency program, and then you do the 3 projects within 2 years. You have to use a qualified contractor for these, or an approved contractor with Excel to get these rebates. And then a little bit on financing. Obviously, you can pay cash for these projects. You can finance it HELOCs or home loans or personal loans. A really good one I just wanted to throw in here is Colorado Renew. The state allocated $30 million for energy efficiency and renewable loans, and it's the best thing going in town in terms of loans because they work with Westera and Elevations Credit Union, and I think they're a point or so lower than like your typical personal loan, but it is a personal loan, really low starting costs, or it's like $150 to $200 for the loan itself. But the key there is up to 20 years. I think it's up to 15 years for a lot of the projects other than solar, and then solar can be 20 years. 20-year loan up to $75,000 at pretty good sort of credit union loan rates. And the Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates, so those rates are coming down a little bit. And you can see all the projects that these would work for. So it's a good program. We work with them as well for heat pumps and stuff. So anyway, I think we're coming up at 45 minutes or so. Thanks for attending. I hope it was some good information. I'd like to finish up with Q&A. If anyone has some questions about your own home in particular too, we could talk about that if you like. So either way, thank you.